At precisely 3:07 a.m., every night for a month, the same sound echoed across the valley, a deep, rhythmic creak like breath pulled through wood. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody except me. It began on a Wednesday. Or at least, that's when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was the floorboards in my attic shifting, or maybe an animal settling on the roof, a raccoon, maybe even a cat. But the noise was too slow, too deliberate. It wasn't the random scuffle of paws or the creak of wood cooling at night. It came in measured intervals, almost like breathing, like something big was exhaling just outside my window. I live at the edge of town, where the houses start to thin and the wild tries to claw its way back. My property backs into a gentle slope, thick with weeds, brush, and one singular tree. A tall, twisted oak, thick in the middle, bark like scabs, its branches like knuckles clawing at the sky. It had always been there. I never paid much attention to it. Until that night. I opened my window, leaned into the night, and listened. Nothing at first. Just the hush of leaves and the distant hum of the highway. And then, it came again. A deep, low creak that rattled not just in the air, but somewhere inside me. It wasn't wind. I've lived in this town my whole life. I know the sound of wind in trees. This was something else. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, lights off, trying to triangulate the sound. It happened every 7 minutes. I timed it. I set a metronome on my phone and waited. And each time, just before the 7th minute struck, the sound would return, longer than before, louder. Not like a groan of pain, like an announcement. By the 3rd night, I wasn't the only one hearing it. Mara, my neighbor, came over the next morning holding her baby on one hip and a cup of coffee in the other. She asked if I'd been doing construction. I said no. She frowned and glanced toward the hill. "Something's out there," she said, her eyes narrowing. "That damn tree of yours making noise." I didn't know what to say. I told her maybe it was the wind, even though I knew it wasn't. Her baby started crying right then, a sharp, piercing wail that startled even her. She apologized and left in a hurry. But that moment stuck with me, because the creaking hadn't happened again until right after the baby cried. By the end of the week, 5 other neighbors had complained. The sound was carrying. Even people 4 houses down said they'd heard it, though they described it differently. One man said it sounded like someone dragging chains through gravel. Another said it was like whale's song, deep and sad. But I always heard it the same. Breath pulled through lungs that didn't belong to anything human. It got louder. Not every night, just when it wanted to be. It would go quiet for hours, and then suddenly let loose a groan so loud it set off car alarms. People started calling the city. There were talks of cutting the tree down, even though no one had proven it was the source. But I knew. I started sleeping in the back room, the one closest to the hill. Not because I was scared, because I needed to know what it would do next. One night, around 3 a.m., I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The town was asleep. The stars were bright. I stood beneath the tree, shining the beam upward, trying to find what could be causing the noise. A cracked limb, maybe rubbing in the wind. But the air was still. No breeze. Not even a shiver in the leaves. And then it happened again, right above me. The tree exhaled. That's the only way I can describe it. A long, groaning release of sound that felt not like something being moved, but something being spoken. My flashlight flickered, and I dropped it. The sound kept going for a full minute. And I swear, in that moment, standing under it with my heartbeat thudding in my ears, I didn't just hear it. I understood it. Not words. Not exactly. But there was emotion in it. Like the tree was reacting, responding. To me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the sound was messing with my brain. But when I bent down to grab my flashlight, I saw something new. Something that hadn't been there before. A small crack had appeared near the base of the trunk. A thin, dark slit about the length of my forearm. It pulsed. Not visually, but in the way the air around it felt. Like heat rising off asphalt. It was as if the tree was breathing through that crack. I backed away. The next morning, there were boot prints on my lawn. Someone else had come in the night. Maybe more than one person. The grass was disturbed. I followed the prints to the base of the tree, but they vanished after that. No footprints going back out. Just in. That's when the notes started. Folded pieces of paper left under my door, in my mailbox, even tucked into the windshield wiper of my car. No names, no signatures. Just scrawled warnings. It's not safe. Get rid of it. It hears everything. One note was written on the back of a missing person flyer. A man I'd never seen before. But I looked him up. He'd vanished 3 weeks ago. The last place his phone had pinged? Less than a quarter mile from my house. I started staying up all night, watching the hill. The tree stopped making noise for 2 days. Silence. Total silence. I thought maybe it was over. Then maybe it had gotten whatever it needed from me. Then the sound came back. Sharper, faster, less like breathing and more like laughing. I couldn't prove it, but I was certain it only made that sound when someone nearby lied. It had happened too many times now. I watched the mailman speak to the woman across the street. He told her he hadn't opened her package by accident. The tree groaned once, short and mocking. She blinked, frowned, and shut the door. It happened again when the neighborhood boy lied to his mother about breaking a window. Again, when someone claimed they didn't know where the dog had gone. Always followed by that deep, sarcastic groan. It didn't just breathe anymore. It judged. The noise wasn't random. It was a response. And I was the only one who could hear it for what it really was. It didn't take long before the complaints turned into something sharper. Not just words whispered between neighbors or passive-aggressive notes left on my gate. It became official, formal, cold. The first time a city vehicle pulled up outside my house, I was standing in the backyard, staring at the tree. It had grown quieter again. Not silent, just withholding, like it was waiting. But the neighborhood wasn't. A man in a reflective vest knocked on my door with the kind of forced politeness that immediately lets you know something is wrong. He held a clipboard, spoke in clipped sentences, and kept glancing toward the hill. "We've received several reports," he began, flipping through the papers. "Noise disturbances, starting around 3 a.m. consistently. Do you know anything about that?" I said I didn't. The tree creaked. The man's pen froze over his clipboard. He didn't say anything at first, just stared past me. Then he shook his head, scribbled something, and handed me a notice. "This is a preliminary warning. If the issue continues, the property may be subject to inspection and enforcement." Enforcement. He left without another word. I stood there on my porch, staring at the paper. It didn't say anything specific. Just vague phrases like compliance, public disturbance, remediation required. But I could feel the intent pressed into every word. Get rid of the tree, or we will. The next day, I heard shouting. Mara again. She was in her driveway, arguing with an older man in a blue polo, someone from the neighborhood association. She kept pointing toward the hill, her face red with frustration. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught a few pieces. "My baby hasn't slept in 3 nights. Waking people up all the way down Sycamore. It's his tree. Why does no one ever talk to him directly?" I ducked back inside before she saw me. The tree, of course, stayed silent. For the rest of the week, flyers were taped to mailboxes. Community noise petition, hill tree nuisance. They were asking for signatures. Not asking, demanding. It was framed as a safety concern, not just noise, but health risks. Something about low-frequency emissions and psychological stressors. By Thursday, the tree began making new sounds. Quieter this time. Clicking, popping, sharp pulses like bones being cracked underwater. It didn't follow the old schedule either. It happened at random now, usually when someone passed too close to it. Almost like it was trying to warn them, or identify them. I started recording. I bought a sound recorder and placed it at the edge of the yard, pointed toward the tree. I left it running for 12 hours. When I played the audio back, there were gaps in the timeline. Not static, not silence, just absence. Whole portions of time simply missing. The machine would be running, and then the time code would jump forward. The sound files were corrupted, but not in any way I recognized. Still, in the parts that remained intact, there were patterns. Tones, pulses, sequences that repeated only when certain people were nearby. The sound of the mailman, always followed by a burst of static. The neighborhood boy, his presence marked by a rapid, tapping rhythm. And every time Mara walked by with her baby, The creaking returned. Measured. Protective. It was watching them. Listening. Cataloging. I played one of the recordings on my laptop, slowed it down, filtered the bass frequencies. There was a phrase buried in the low end. Mechanical, distorted, but audible. Don't lie to me. I played it again. It was no fluke. The tree had spoken. I thought I could ignore the rest of the town, but they weren't ignoring me. A week later, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't from the city. It was from a private legal firm representing the homeowners committee. Failure to address the sound-producing tree on your property constitutes a violation of Community Code Section 46.12. You have 10 days to demonstrate removal, or remediation measures will be undertaken at your expense. 10 days. I read the letter 3 times, then walked outside and stared up at the tree. It looked the same. Still, silent, unmoved. But I could feel something had changed. The air around it was heavier. The light didn't fall quite right on its bark. And something kept brushing at the back of my mind, the sense that it was waiting for me to act, that it knew this moment would come. So I spoke to it, not in a ritualistic way, not like prayer, just aloud. They want you gone. No response. I moved closer. I know you hear them. You don't like liars. But what if the truth gets you killed? Silence. I knelt down by the base and ran my hand along the bark. It was warm, not sun warm, something deeper, the kind of warmth you feel when you touch skin. That same pulse was still there, under the surface. Waiting. I left the recorder running again that night, but I didn't leave it outside. I strapped a contact microphone to the base of the trunk. The result? Clear. Too clear. The audio showed no breaks, no jumps. But something else happened. When I played it back, the tree wasn't just making noise, it was transmitting. Whispers layered beneath the groans. Some in voices I recognized, others I'd never heard before. One whisper, impossibly, was my own voice, a phrase I hadn't said in years. You promised you wouldn't tell. My mouth went dry. I hadn't said that out loud since I was 17. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote a note, and signed, and left it in every mailbox on my street. One sentence. The tree doesn't make noise. It reveals it. By morning, every single note had been torn up and thrown on my lawn. I didn't react. I didn't speak to anyone. I just did what no one expected. I bought a microphone, a proper one, condenser style, broadcast quality. I set up a small amp near the hill, positioned the mic at the base of the tree, and turned the gain up high. I wired it all together with a timer to turn on at exactly 3:07 a.m. And then I waited. Let them call it madness. Let them say I was provoking it. But if they wanted the tree silenced, if they wanted the truth buried, they'd have to listen to it first. All of it. Loud, clear, and indisputable. Because if it was going to speak, I was going to make sure the whole town heard it. The first time it mimicked a voice, I didn't notice. Not immediately. It was subtle, buried in the background of a late-night recording. I was listening with headphones, sifting through hours of static and low rumbling, half asleep at my desk when I heard it. A phrase so brief, so out of place, I had to rewind 3 times to be sure I hadn't imagined it. Don't forget the jar. It was a fragment. For words. But it wasn't just the words, it was the voice. Soft, measured, female. It stopped me cold. Because I hadn't heard that voice in over a decade. Not since my mother's funeral. And I knew that phrase. She used to say it every time I visited her. She kept homemade jam on the shelf by the back door, in a chipped old jar with a cracked lid. It was one of the last things she said to me. I had forgotten the jar that time. I yanked the headphones off and stared at the waveform on my laptop screen. I replayed it again. Still there. Not distorted. Not vague. Her voice almost gentle, almost teasing. I shut the laptop, walked out of the room, sat on the floor, breath held, waiting for the panic to pass. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I returned to the hill. The tree stood the same as always, bark rough and gnarled, branches unmoved in the still air. But I knew something had changed. The recordings weren't just catching ambient sounds. They were receiving something, pulling fragments from somewhere deeper. I started cataloging the voices, noting patterns, times, frequencies. Most of them were broken or incomplete, single words, scattered syllables. But now and then, I'd get a sentence, sometimes even a few lines strung together, stitched with pauses like breath. What chilled me most wasn't that they were voices. It was that I recognized so many of them. My childhood friend Sam, who vanished when we were 15 after jumping the quarry fence. My sixth-grade teacher, Mrs. Halden, who died in her sleep and whose voice I'd heard only once since, in a dream. An old man who used to live down the street and gave out raisins instead of candy on Halloween. He'd been dead 6 years, but he was there, whispering the same bitter phrase he used every time we knocked on his door. Rotten teeth for rotten children. I played the recordings at different speeds, reversed them, filtered them through spectrographs. No matter what I did, the result was the same. Voices no one alive should remember. But the tree did, and somehow so did I. One night, I heard my own voice again. Not a whisper this time. A full sentence, clear as if I'd just spoken aloud. It wasn't an accident. It played on a loop for almost 30 seconds. The air around the tree grew heavier every day. People stopped walking their dogs past the house. Children crossed the street to avoid the hill. At first, I thought it was the sound. But now I wondered if they felt it too. The weight of memory bleeding from the bark. The way the light bent strangely near the roots. The strange hum that never quite went away. On the 7th night, I woke at 3:07 a.m. with no alarm, no sound. Just a presence. I walked outside in bare feet. The grass was wet, the air dead still. No creaking, no whispers. But something pulled me toward the tree. I stepped onto the slope and stood beneath its twisted canopy. Then I heard it. Not a groan, not a phrase. A name. Mine. Not shouted, not said in anger. Just spoken. Elias. My stomach turned cold. I hadn't told anyone my full name in years. I rarely even said it aloud. Everyone called me Eli. But the voice that spoke, it wasn't unfamiliar. It was mine. It sounded like a recording of myself from long ago. Younger, rawer, without the wear of the years. Like the version of me that used to scream into pillows or talk to the dark when I thought no one could hear. Then another voice followed. A man's voice I hadn't heard since I was 17. You buried it, but it remembers. I took a step back, breath shallow. I whispered into the air, what remembers? The tree groaned, and then came the sound of something shifting inside it. Not a branch, not a crack. More like a door being unlocked very deep within. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't just mimicking voices. It was pulling them from me. Every word, every memory I thought I'd buried, the tree was digging through them, sorting, selecting. Not just my life, my mind, my secrets. I sat down on the damp grass and listened until morning. I stopped leaving the hill after that. I set up camp under the tree. A small tent, some food, the recording gear. I needed to hear everything. It wasn't about the town anymore. It wasn't about their complaints or their warnings. This had become personal, intimate. The tree had opened something I didn't know still existed in me. A wound, a vault, a confession waiting for the right echo. And the voices didn't stop. They got clearer. Some were people I'd forgotten ever knowing. A cousin who died before I was born, a neighbor I only met once. They spoke in riddles, in memories twisted by time. The ink never dried. It's still under your bed. You never told her the truth. Each line hit like a blade. Each voice like a specter made of splinters. The tree wasn't speaking to the world. It was speaking to me. But then came the final confirmation, the one I couldn't explain or ignore. The voice of the one person I had no recording of. No letters, no tapes, no old voicemails. Mira. She spoke at exactly 3:07 one night, just as the wind shifted for the first time in days. You left me in the dark. I felt my knees. It was her. Every nuance, every inflection. I knew it. She was gone. Had been gone for years. An accident, they said. A cliff, a wrong step, no one else around. But I'd been there. I'd seen her fall, and I'd never spoken a word of what happened that day. Until now, because the tree already knew, and it had my voice, my guilt, my silence. It wasn't echoing memories. It was listening, learning. And now it wanted the rest. The night it spoke my name, truly spoke it. The air had that hollow stillness that comes just before a thunderstorm, the kind where even the insects go quiet and the clouds hang too low. I'd been sleeping in the tent by the tree for 5 nights by then, catching fragments of voices and phrases that didn't belong in the present. Each recording had become more intricate, like the tree wasn't just remembering anymore. It was reconstructing, editing, choosing. I had dozed off with my head resting against the recorder, headphones loose around my neck, half wrapped in a thin blanket. I dreamt something brittle and disjointed. Shards of a kitchen I hadn't seen since childhood, the sound of glass breaking in slow motion, a hallway where the walls whispered. But the dream ended the moment I heard it. "Elias," it said again. Only this time, it wasn't filtered through static or buried in distortion. It was unmistakably clear. The tree didn't creak or groan or shift its branches. It spoke. I bolted upright, heart hammering, headphones flung off as I scanned the darkness. The tree loomed above, silent, unmoving. My breath caught. I whispered my own name back, not loud, just to test the sound against the one I'd heard. It didn't match. The voice that had come from the tree was older, rougher, weighted with a sadness I hadn't let myself feel in years. Then it said, "Come closer." I didn't move at first. Every instinct screamed that this should be impossible, that bark doesn't have vocal cords and wood doesn't form words. But curiosity, or something deeper, pulled me forward. I stepped toward the base of the tree. The slit in the bark, the one that pulsed with heat weeks ago, had changed. It had widened slightly. Not torn, not damaged. Just parted, like lips. No blood, no sap, just a soft, glistening interior that shimmered faintly, as though wet with dew or memory. I crouched and stared into it. A sound trickled out. Not a voice this time, but breathing. Ragged, familiar. It matched mine. Then the voice returned, but it didn't say my name again. It said hers. "Mira." I staggered back. My chest felt too tight, my legs unsteady. "Why?" I asked aloud, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to, the tree, the memory, or myself. "You left her," it answered. But it wasn't it anymore. It was me. My voice, from a moment I had buried under years of half-truths and misremembering. The same voice I'd used that day on the cliff, when Mira had slipped and reached out and I had hesitated. I told myself she was already falling, that it was too late. But I had heard her scream my name. The tree spoke again, and this time it was her scream, not in pain, but in accusation. "You watched me fall." I dropped to my knees, palms in the dirt. My stomach lurched. I wanted to get up, to run, to crawl away from the roots that were now buzzing beneath the soil like they were alive. But I couldn't, because it wasn't just guilt. It was truth. I had watched her fall, and I had done nothing. In the days that followed, the tree didn't speak again, not directly. But it didn't have to. It had shown me that it could, that it would whenever it wanted. Its silence now felt heavier than sound. People stopped coming near the hill. The microphone I'd set up before had been smashed. Not by weather, but by someone. They didn't leave a note. They didn't have to. The message was clear. No more voices, no more truths. Just quiet. Just pretend. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I spent every night at the base of that tree, headphones on, listening. I stopped eating properly. Stopped showering. I barely slept. My skin grew pale, my eyes bloodshot. But I heard things. Not just memories, predictions, warnings, possibilities. I started asking questions aloud. I'd sit cross-legged under its branches and whisper confessions. "Why me? Why do you know these things? What are you?" The tree never answered directly, but the recordings always changed afterward. The voices became more layered. At one point, I swear I heard Mira again, not in pain, but laughing. Not joyfully, coldly, knowing. Then one night, the voice I'd feared most. My father, dead 10 years, buried in a town 3 states away. He spoke with the same stern authority he always had, never shouting, never soft. Just precise. "Everything finds its roots again, Elias. Even you." I shook with something between grief and anger. "I'm not like you," I whispered. "I never wanted this." The tree shifted slightly. For the first time since I'd begun watching it, a leaf fell. Just one. It landed at my feet. When I picked it up, I saw it wasn't a leaf at all. It was paper. A torn page from a journal I hadn't seen since I was 16, one I thought I'd burned. On the paper, written in my own handwriting, "She trusted me." My legs gave out. I lay in the grass, clutching the paper, listening as the wind finally returned to the hill. It moved through the branches like breath. The tree didn't speak again that night, but it didn't need to. It had already said the only thing that mattered. My name, and then hers. There was no more pretending that it wasn't aware. No more doubt that it had memory, not just mine, but of anyone who had ever stood beneath it, bled near it, screamed into its bark. It didn't just echo voices. It held them. And now that it had mine, I could feel something growing inside me. Not roots, not branches, but responsibility. The weight of silence lifted, replaced by the ache of truth. I had tried to bury a moment. The tree had unearthed it. Now the only question left was what it wanted me to do with it. I flipped the switch at 3:06 a.m. The amplifier hummed quietly as the microphone warmed to life, its red light casting a faint glow across the wet grass. I stood there alone, eyes on the tree, heart hammering as though I just sprinted uphill. I had wired everything earlier that day, checking cables twice, grounding the signal with a makeshift rig that could carry the sound clean and far, not just to my house but across the valley. I didn't want any distortion. No excuses. No one would be able to say they misheard. For the first minute, there was nothing. Just wind, distant owls, a hiss of the amplifier's breath. Then the tree released its own. It began slowly, a low moan like a door opening underwater. A dense, cavernous tone that vibrated through my teeth. Then came the shifting, not of branches, but of tone like someone adjusting their throat before speaking. I'd heard it before, in dozens of recordings, always buried under the noise. But tonight it had been invited, amplified, welcomed. The first clear sound that emerged wasn't a word, but a sob. Human, guttural, the kind of cry someone tries to swallow down before it spills out anyway. It filled the speakers, loud and raw, sending birds scattering from trees down the slope. Lights flickered on in nearby homes. Curtains twitched. Somewhere, a car alarm chirped once, then fell silent. And then the voices came, one by one, each more undeniable than the last. I told her I was sorry. A man's voice confessed, high and reedy. But I wasn't. Not really. Then silence. Then another voice, this one firmer, resolute. She never knew about the pills. I lied. Every day. Until it didn't matter anymore. Another silence, shorter this time. I only meant to scare her. That one drew a physical reaction from the tree. A sharp, creaking jolt from its midsection, as if it were choking on the words. The amplifier hissed, steadied, and broadcast again. She was already dead when I found her. I took the money. I buried the ledger. I told the officer he had been with me the whole night. He hadn't. The voices didn't overlap. They took turns, a cruel parade of confessions that spilled from the bark as though they'd been fermenting there for years. Each voice distinct, full of texture and familiarity. Anyone listening would recognize someone. A teacher, a friend, a neighbor, the head of the HOA. I didn't know whose secrets came first. I didn't care. The point wasn't the order, it was the exposure. By 3:14 a.m., 5 houses had their lights on. By 3:16, a car pulled to the curb, its headlights off, its driver frozen behind the wheel, staring up at the slope with both hands gripping the steering wheel. By 3:18, someone screamed. Not through the speaker, for one of the houses. A scream of panic. Recognition. By 3:21, someone began shouting my name. Not the tree. Not a recording. Someone human. Elias. Shut off. You don't know what you're doing. But I did. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was letting it speak. The tree didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It simply relayed what it had gathered, calmly, like reading diary entries aloud in a courtroom no one had prepared for. There were names now. First names, then full names. Dates. Details. The voice from the tree would change mid-sentence. A woman turning into a child, turning into a man. But the flow remained seamless, like the tree was reading from a single book written by hundreds of different authors. They had all written their sins into it over the years without even knowing it. The microphone caught everything. There were no glitches, no distortion, no doubt. And the most horrifying thing? No one denied it. Not out loud. Not once. There were no cries of, "It's lying," or "That's not true." Only stunned silence and doors slamming shut. At 3:27, Mara appeared. She ran halfway up the hill before freezing, staring at me like I'd turned to stone. Her baby wasn't with her. She didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at the tree, lips parted, pale as ash. Then, her voice broke out of the speaker. "I was never sick," it said. I lied so he wouldn't leave. Mara's knees buckled. She fell to the grass, shaking, but she didn't try to run. She didn't shout. She just wept, as though something she'd held inside for years had finally been ripped loose. Others came soon after. First 2 people, then 4, then 10. They lined the base of the hill like an audience before an altar, each face bathed in faint amplifier light, listening to the slow, methodical unveiling of a town's concealed rot. Some wept quietly. Others clutched one another in disbelief. One man sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes, as though praying. And yet, even in that surreal stillness, I knew it couldn't last. At 3:41, someone brought a hammer. He approached from the side, low to the ground, face wrapped in cloth, moving with desperate anger. I didn't recognize him until he raised the hammer. It was the same city official who had handed me the first warning letter. He didn't aim for me. He went for the amplifier. He struck once, hard. The sound warped immediately, the voices bending into a low whine. But before the second strike could land, the tree responded. It groaned, not mechanically, not like wood under pressure. It screamed, a deep, thunderous bellow that rattled the sky. The man froze, ears clutched, and dropped the hammer. Then silence. Absolute. The microphone's red light faded to black. The speaker cracked. The tree didn't speak again for 3 weeks. Not a creak. Not a groan. Nothing. It stood tall and motionless on the hill, as if the night of the broadcast had never happened. But the town had changed. No one said it aloud. Not in public, not to each other, but I saw it in their eyes. In the way people avoided meeting my gaze. In how they crossed the street when they saw me walking. In how the silence that once made this place feel peaceful now made it feel suffocating. Some pretended it hadn't happened. Others claimed I had manipulated the audio, staged everything. But their words betrayed them. A tremor in the voice. A glance toward the hill. The lingering suspicion that something had spoken truths only they should have known. I became a pariah overnight. But the tree didn't care. And neither did I. People stopped going near the slope entirely. Children were forbidden to play anywhere nearby. A couple of residents tried to organize a cleanup, a safety and beautification initiative, but they never made it up the hill. Something always stopped them. First, it was bad weather, then a twisted ankle, then a generator fire that destroyed their sound equipment. Eventually, they stopped trying. I left my house for good after the second week. I didn't pack. I didn't lock the door. I walked out with only what I could carry: the recorder, the notebook, the last leaf the tree had dropped or given. I didn't say goodbye. There was no one to say it to. And even if there had been, what would I have said? Instead, I watched from the edge of the woods. I camped. I waited. I listened. And one morning, something changed. It happened quietly. No sound. No thunder. Just a smell, wet earth, and something sharp like static. I rose from my cot and walked to the clearing. The original tree was still there, unchanged. But now, 10 feet away, something else had broken through the ground. A sapling. Small, frail, but unmistakably the same. Same bark, even at that young age, dark, ridged, almost too dense for something so new. Its leaves were curled inward like fists. Its roots had cracked the dirt clean open, and around it, the grass had withered in a perfect circle. No one had planted it. Not me. Not the town. But there it was. That day, I walked into town. I hadn't shaved in weeks, and my clothes smelled of ash and earth. People stared. I didn't speak. I went straight to the center of the town square and stood there, waiting. It didn't take long. The mayor arrived first. Then, the head of the neighborhood association. Then, 2 police officers, though their hands never touched their weapons. One by one, they stood at a distance, forming a loose half-circle. No one came closer than they had to. But I could feel the question hanging in the air like smoke. What do we do now? I didn't answer. I just pointed. That afternoon, a small crowd gathered at the hill's base. Curious, hesitant. Someone brought a pair of pruning shears. Another carried a jug of gasoline. They stared up at the sapling, uncertain. No one wanted to be the first to touch it. The man with the gasoline stepped forward. He unscrewed the cap, raised the container, and froze. The tree made a sound. Not loud, barely audible, just a single syllable. No, it wasn't menacing. It wasn't pleading. It was calm, firm, final. The man dropped the can. He didn't run. He just turned around and walked back down the hill. No one stopped him. No one followed. The rest of the crowd dispersed slowly, as if waking from a collective spell. And the tree, both of them, remained. Days passed, then weeks. The second tree grew faster than it should have. Within a month, it was my height. Within 2, taller. The grass around it never returned. Birds stopped nesting nearby. The microphone equipment I had buried, even unplugged, even broken, began to emit faint clicking sounds during the night. Someone left a candle at the base of the new tree. Then another. Then a folded piece of paper. Then an old photograph. No names. No explanations. Just offerings. Like guilt made visible. I watched all of it from a distance. I no longer approached the trees directly. They didn't need me to. They had already learned everything I had to offer. The truth wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the hill. Months passed, and then one morning, I woke to news I hadn't expected. The original tree was gone, burned down during the night. No one claimed responsibility. No alarms were triggered. But everyone knew. The charred ground at the top of the slope left no doubt. It was blackened, scorched deep into the roots. The second tree, just feet away, remained untouched. Untouched, but no longer silent. That evening, the sound returned. Stronger, sharper. There were no more distortions, no more static. The voices rang clear as glass, projected without wires, without amplification. They rose from the hill and spread across the town. One voice per night. No repeats, no explanations. Just one person's secret, laid bare for all to hear. Each morning after, someone would leave town, quietly, with luggage, without goodbyes. And each evening, the tree would speak again. Some called it judgment. Others called it divine justice. A few still called it madness. But no one dared cut the second tree down. Not anymore. The fear wasn't that it would scream. The fear was that it would remember you. By winter, a third sapling had appeared. Smaller still, nestled in a crack beside the old courthouse steps. No one questioned it. And when spring came, the town had grown quieter again, but not in the old way. Not in the comforting hush of small-town peace. It was the quiet of watching your words, of remembering every lie you ever told, and wondering which one would speak next. As for me, I moved deeper into the woods. I still write. I still listen. But I no longer record. There's no point. The tree doesn't need help being heard anymore. The truth grows on its own now. Loud and clear.